Undercover boss orders coffee and toast, freezes when he hears the tips are being stolen. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The ones who do the work don't get the tips. The one who gets them is the manager's nephew. She said it so casually, like it was normal. No one asked. No one checked. But that morning, a man in a faded flannel shirt was sitting right there, hearing every word. His name wasn't really Walt Simmons, even though it was stitched onto the pocket. His real name was Jackson Reeves, over 50, founder and CEO of Sunrise Restaurant Group, but no one in that diner knew it. They only saw a tired man, nursing a black coffee, quietly watching. What Jackson heard made the entire system collapse in his mind. Just a few quiet questions, an old notebook, and a silent investigation began. The drizzle outside blurred the windshield, like the whole town wanted to fog over the truth. Neon letters that read, "Open 24 hours," flickered above the weathered sign. To most people, it looked like any other roadside diner. To Jackson, the amber glow felt heavy, hiding things he had ignored for too long. He lingered in his truck before stepping out. The toast he had grabbed from a gas station across the street was still in the bag, untouched. He hadn't come for breakfast. Not really. He came to test whether the culture he built was still alive or if it had rotted without him noticing. Inside, the early shift crew moved behind the counter. Their motions weren't lazy, but they weren't alive either. They poured coffee like they were on autopilot, not pride, just survival. Jackson had said it once years ago, if you want to know if a restaurant is healthy, don't ask the manager. Watch how the staff pours coffee at 7 a.m. Today, he was going to test his own words. He slipped into the corner booth. The bell above the door had jingled faintly when he walked in, but no one looked up. No one asked for his name. Only the soft hum of the espresso machine acknowledged him. From that booth, he could see everyone. That's when she appeared, Cassie. She wasn't flashy. Hair pulled back, sleeves slightly frayed, apron old but spotless. She moved with quiet intention. While others drifted in and out of tasks, she was steady. When she set down his order, black coffee, toast, 2 little packets of jam, she did it so gently, the plate didn't make a sound. "Black coffee and toast," she said, polite but subdued. "I added butter and jam just in case." Jackson nodded, his tone neutral. "Appreciate it." Then, almost casually, like small talk, "Busy morning, huh? Guess the tips aren't bad at this hour." The pause was only half a second, but he caught it, a flicker in her eyes, though her hands never stopped. She smiled, but it didn't reach her face. Her voice dropped just below the hum of the machine. "Morning shifts are the worst for tips, especially when we split them, but only a few actually get anything." Bing. She said it as if it didn't matter, but for Jackson, it was the first crack in the facade, a fracture that revealed something deeper, something the spreadsheets had never shown him. He lifted the coffee to his lips, but it had gone cold already. The bitterness wasn't in the cup, it was in her words. He watched Cassie return to the floor, pivoting between tables with practiced grace. She was everywhere at once, clearing plates, folding napkins, refilling mugs. Yet she never touched the register. Others lingered near it, tapping screens, handling every payment. That was the moment Jackson knew something wasn't adding up, and this time, he wouldn't look away. The silent investigation had begun. Jackson didn't react right away. He sat in the corner booth, his eyes following Cassie as she moved between tables, pouring refills, collecting plates, guiding a trainee without missing a step. She worked with the kind of precision you only see in people who've done the job 1,000 times without recognition. Across the room, 2 other employees lingered near the register. Tyler, a young man with slicked-back hair and a pressed uniform, and Chase, slightly older, stood beside him. Neither carried trays, neither moved toward customers unless it was to swipe a card or handle a payment. Tyler tapped the touchscreen with his index finger, arms crossed when he wasn't processing tips. Every payment passed through that screen, and Jackson noticed Cassie never touched it once. When she returned to clear a mug from the table beside him, Jackson asked quietly, "Why don't you run payments yourself?" She leaned in just enough to speak under the buzz of the espresso machine. "I don't have access. My role isn't set up for digital tips. I'm listed as supplemental staff. That means invisible. Jackson met her eyes for the first time. Calm, steady. Who decides that? Her gaze shifted toward the counter. The branch manager, Brad Coleman, was laughing with a regular, crisp shirt, polished pen clipped to his pocket. His posture was relaxed, his presence confident, the kind of manager who looked respectable on the surface. Cassie's lips barely moved. Brad, he sets the roles. Tyler's his nephew. He always has full access, always gets the morning shifts. Jackson's jaw tightened. The system had been designed for fairness, equal splits, role-based access tied to actual jobs. What he was seeing now wasn't a misunderstanding. It was manipulation. Then Cassie did something unexpected. From her apron, she pulled out a thin paper notebook. The edges were soft from use, the cover bent, corners curling. She held it like something fragile but vital. I didn't want to complain. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy, so I started writing it down. She slid it onto the table. Jackson opened it carefully. Inside were neat records, dates, table numbers, totals, pause tips displayed, and the smaller amounts she actually received. Red circles marked the discrepancies, notes in the margin, times of day, initials. It wasn't an accusation, it was evidence. Her voice was low. I've lost over $600 in the past month. But what hurts more is nobody asked who was dividing it. Nobody checked. Jackson closed the notebook with reverence. He didn't argue. He didn't need to. In his chest, something shifted. A business can survive slower mornings, even bad reviews. But when your best workers believe the system doesn't see them anymore, that's what kills a company from the inside. Cassie returned to the floor. Jackson stayed still, the notebook hidden in front of him, every detail already etched in his mind. He pulled his phone from his pocket, snapped photos of every page discreetly, and tucked a small, sticky note inside. The words were simple. Keep documenting. Don't give this to anyone. Wait for me to return. He pushed his coffee cup forward to conceal it just as Brad disappeared into the back office. At that exact moment, Tyler tapped the register again, this time accessing deeper menus with a fluency that didn't belong to a part-time server. Jackson caught the screen just long enough to read, User role settings, advanced access, username, Tyler C. His grip tightened around the coffee mug. The bitterness wasn't from the drink anymore. It was the clarity of seeing his own system rewritten, bent into a favor bank. Nearby, a new employee fumbled nervously with her tray at table 5. Cassie crouched beside her, showing her how to enter allergy notes, how to adjust codes. Then, in a low whisper only inches away, she added, Careful not to let Tyler help you. He won't do it for you. Jackson heard it. And in that moment, he understood. Cassie wasn't just carrying trays. She was holding the moral structure of this entire branch together, silently, while others stood by. A few minutes later, Chase tried to log in to the POS. Weird, he muttered. I could log in yesterday. Now it says restricted. Tyler didn't even glance up. He just smiled faintly. Probably a glitch. I'll handle it. Jackson tilted his head, still calm, still silent, but his mind was mapping the scheme. Custom sub-roles, limited access, redirected tips. Clever enough to look like configuration, not theft. He didn't need caffeine anymore. His blood was already heating. The silent investigation had begun, and Brad Coleman had no idea the man in the corner booth was the one person who could rewrite his entire future. Jackson sat quietly in that corner booth, the notebook still resting in front of him beneath the rim of his coffee cup. He didn't flip through the pages again. He didn't need to. Every number Cassie had written matched what he had already seen. Her quiet evidence lined up with the suspicion that had been whispering in his gut for weeks. But instincts weren't enough. Not for a CEO. He needed data. He needed a pattern. And now, he had both. When Cassie stepped away to serve another table, Jackson reached into his pocket. His phone's camera clicked softly as he photographed each page, every date, every red circle. Then he took out an old pen and scribbled a short note on a folded sticky paper. Keep documenting. Don't hand this to anyone. Wait for me to return. He slid it discreetly into the notebook's front cover and pushed the coffee cup forward to hide it. At the counter, Brad had stepped into the back office. Tyler stood alone behind the register. Jackson's eyes caught the glow of the touchscreen just long enough to read what mattered. Tyler wasn't processing a payment. He was digging deeper, flipping through settings with a familiarity that spoke of practice. The header read, User Role Settings, Advanced Access. The username, Tyler C. Jackson tightened his jaw. That wasn't a glitch. That was design. Behind him, a new trainee hesitated, tray shaking slightly in her hands. She hovered by table 5, unsure how to enter a comp request. Cassie noticed instantly. She crouched down beside the trainee, showing her how to code the order, how to add allergy flags, how to double-check modifiers. Then, softly enough that only those within inches could hear, she said, "Be careful not to let Tyler do your entries. He won't do it for you." Jackson heard it, and he understood. Cassie wasn't just surviving. She was quietly holding together the ethical spine of the entire branch. Moments later, Chase frowned at the register. "That's strange," he muttered. "I could log in yesterday. Now it says restricted." Tyler didn't even look at him. A faint smirk crossed his face. "Probably just a glitch. I'll take care of it." Jackson sat still, expression neutral, but his mind was already drawing the map. Create custom sub-roles, limit access, redirect tips. If you were clever enough, it wouldn't look like theft. It would look like structure. The coffee in front of him was cold now, but he didn't need caffeine. His blood was already warm, not from anger but from clarity. This wasn't favoritism. This was fraud. That afternoon, when the drizzle outside finally cleared, Jackson left Sunrise Diner number 28 without a word. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The storm inside him was already building. It took exactly 93 seconds. That was the length of the call. Jackson's voice was low but steady as he spoke into his phone. "Mara, we have a problem. The POS system is being manipulated. I need you to go in quiet, line by line, every role assignment, every tip account." On the other end, Mara Lynn, head of internal investigations, didn't hesitate. She had worked with Jackson for 7 years. She had dismantled 3 embezzlement schemes in 4. She asked no questions. She simply said, "Understood." Within the hour, the POS terminal at Branch 28 had been switched into silent audit mode. Hidden software tracked every role change, every override, every dollar rerouted, without alerting the local staff. The diner carried on as usual. Orders went out, coffee poured, customers paid. But now every keystroke was being logged. The first findings came the next morning. Finding 1, the system had been modified with a hidden tier called Preferred Internal, not visible on the public-facing permission screen, but very real. 3 accounts carried this tier: Brad Coleman, manager; Tyler C., part-time server; and a shadow account labeled Kitchen Support 03. Finding 2, in the last 30 days, digital tips totaled over $4,800. Of that, 67% had been funneled through Tyler, even though ticket data showed he served less than 15% of tables. Finding 3, payroll listed a kitchen employee named Marcus Hill, clocked in 21 of the last 25 mornings. But Marcus Hill didn't exist. No HR record, no tax file. A duplicate Social Security number flagged years ago when Jackson quietly investigated another branch. That case had been dropped for lack of proof. The manager back then? Brad Coleman. The last finding came from finance. An out-of-state LLC called Douglas Henderson had been receiving weekly service fees, matching the missing tips dollar for dollar. On paper, it looked like a vendor contract, but the contact email on the registration traced back to Brad before his promotion. Jackson didn't need more. This wasn't just favoritism. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. It was a rigged machine. And Cassie, by keeping her notebook, had uncovered not just unfairness, but the first thread of a multi-branch fraud network. The storm inside Jackson had a name now, a face, and a lead. And it would end exactly where it started, with a cup of coffee, a slice of toast, and a woman the system tried to erase. Friday morning, 9:02 a.m., peak hour at Sunrise Diner, number 28. The tables were full, the air thick with the smell of buttered toast and reheated bacon. The coffee machine hissed steadily, steam clouding the glass. Cassie moved quickly, apron already spotted from the first rush, yet her pace never slowed. A trainee shadowed her steps, learning by watching, while she carried the floor like she had every morning before. Behind the counter, Tyler stood at the register, tapping through transactions with the rhythm of someone who didn't just know the system, he owned it. Each swipe, each beep of approval, fed into a pattern he believed no one could see. To his left, Chase lingered with a refill pot, half present, waiting for cues. And leaning against the bar, Brad Coleman smiled with practiced ease, laughing with a regular, shirt-pressed sharp, voice polished. To anyone watching, it looked like control. To Jackson Reeves, it looked like a stage about to collapse. At 9:06 a.m., the bell above the door jingled again. This time, no flannel, no baseball cap, no uneven shuffle. Jackson walked in wearing a charcoal gray suit, the same one he'd worn when opening the company's 50th location. His posture was straight, his presence unmistakable. And right behind him was Mara Lynn, tablet in hand, already synced to the live audit feed. The room froze. Brad's smile faltered mid-sentence. Tyler's fingers slowed above the screen. Even Chase, who had just started pouring a refill, stopped with the carafe tilted. Silence spread like a switch had been flipped. "Good morning," Jackson said calmly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "I won't take much of your time. Just the last 15 years I spent building this company." He stepped forward, placing his hand on the counter. Steady, controlled. His eyes locked onto Brad. "I once said fairness is not a slogan, it's a behavior. Repeated. Every day. But here," his voice trailed, just long enough to let the weight settle. "Here, someone rewrote the rules." He turned to Mara. She tapped her tablet, and graphs bloomed instantly on the screen. Tip distribution, role assignments, transfer ledgers. One chart showed Tyler receiving 67% of tips. Another showed restricted logins. The third, payments routed to Douglas Henderson, LLC. Brad recognized it the moment the name appeared. His expression cracked, a flash of panic breaking through the facade. Tyler tried to speak, but Jackson cut him off with nothing more than a glance. "You received 2/3 of this diner's tips," Jackson said flatly. "Not because you worked harder, not because you served more tables, but because someone handed you keys to a door no one else knew existed." The silence grew heavier. Cassie stood still for the first time that morning, tray balanced at her side, eyes locked on the man she thought was just another customer days earlier. The trainee beside her looked confused, then slowly realized what was happening. Even the kitchen staff peeked out from the back, arms folded, waiting. Jackson didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Brad," he said evenly, "effective immediately, you are suspended. Your records will be handed to legal. Tyler, the same applies to you. There is no room in this company for anyone who turns transparency into a hustle." Brad opened his mouth, searching for words, but nothing came out. Tyler's jaw tightened, but his hands stayed frozen over the register. Jackson's gaze swept the room. "If you've done the work, you'll be seen. You'll be paid. But if you've hidden behind loopholes and smiles, you will be removed, no matter how long you've stood at the register." No applause followed, no cheers, just silence. The kind that settles when the truth finally lands with names attached. The kind that weighs heavier than noise. Jackson stood at the counter, scanning faces Cassie's calm resolve, the trainee's sudden alertness, the quiet stares of staff who had stayed silent too long. His eyes shifted back to the POS terminal, still glowing behind Tyler. "Starting today," he said, pointing at the screen, "this system will no longer be controlled by a privileged few." He turned to the back, spotting a young busser clutching a towel nervously. "What's your name?" The boy startled. "Ben," he said softly. "Ben," Jackson nodded. "You're the first to use it under the new access protocol. No more invisible roles. No more backdoor overrides. From now on, the person who does the work is the one credited for it." Ben stepped forward hesitantly, hands shaking slightly, but he logged in with his own ID for the first time. The entire staff watched as the new access took hold, a line crossed that couldn't be erased. Mara tapped her tablet again, revealing a dashboard of green bars, tips distributed transparently, and red flags where clustering still appeared across other branches. "We're not just auditing this diner," she said. "We're watching the entire system." The room was silent, but this silence felt different. Not fear, not dismissal. For the first time, it felt like a shift, like something broken was finally being put back into place. The diner held its breath. No one moved. No one reached for a mug or a tray. Every eye was fixed on the counter where Jackson stood, the system behind him exposed like an open wound. For a long moment, all that filled the room was the steady hiss of the espresso machine. Cassie, tray still in hand, stood taller than she had all week. The trainee beside her looked like she'd just woken up from a dream, suddenly alert to what was unfolding in front of her. From the back, a cook leaned against the doorway, arms folded, watching in silence. It was as if the entire staff had been waiting for this moment without ever admitting it. Jackson didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words carried a different kind of weight. "If you've done the work," he said slowly, "you will be seen. You will be paid. But if you've hidden behind loopholes, if you've twisted the system for yourself, you will be gone, starting now." His gaze moved across the room, face to face, not searching for fear but for recognition, for relief. And he saw it nodding, quiet exhalations, shoulders unclenching. The truth wasn't just a verdict, it was a release. He turned back toward Brad and Tyler. "Brad Coleman," he said, tone flat. "Effective immediately, you are suspended. Your files will be transferred to legal. Tyler, the same. Your access is revoked. You will not process another transaction in this building." Mara tapped her tablet. The POS terminal beeped softly as access cards were deactivated in real time. Tyler stepped back, his hands falling to his sides, the smirk gone from his face. Brad opened his mouth as if to argue, but no sound came out. He glanced around, searching for allies, but the room was already gone from him. Jackson didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply placed his hand on the counter, steady, and spoke for everyone to hear. This company was not built to hand power to families behind closed doors. It was built for people like Cassie, who carry the weight without anyone asking if they're okay. That ends today. Cassie froze, her lips parting slightly. For weeks, maybe months, she had worked in silence, convinced no one saw. And now, the man who had been quietly drinking her coffee days ago had turned the entire diner toward her. The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The silence itself was heavy enough. The silence of truth finally spoken out loud. Names attached. Masks removed. Jackson's eyes swept once more across the room. Some employees looked down, ashamed. Others finally looked up, faces straight for the first time that morning. And in that moment, the divide between seen and unseen collapsed. He gestured toward the POS screen still glowing behind the counter. "From this day forward," he said, "there will be no invisible roles, no hidden access. Whoever does the work will be the one recorded, credited, and paid." He pointed toward Ben, the nervous young busser still clutching his towel. "You logged in today under the new system. That matters. That's the future of this company, clear, fair, accountable." Ben swallowed hard but nodded. He didn't need to say anything. The act itself, the sight of his name on the screen for the first time, was louder than words. Mara lifted her tablet again, showing a live dashboard. Green bars stretched evenly across names. Red markers pulsed where irregularities still appeared across the wider network. "It's not just here," she said, her voice firm. "Other branches are being audited as we speak. This won't stop with one diner." Jackson nodded once, his voice lowered, calmer now, but sharper. "Fairness is not a slogan. It's not a plaque on a wall. It's action, repeated every day. And if anyone here, or anywhere in this company, thinks they can hide behind smiles or paperwork, remember this moment. It doesn't matter if you're behind the counter or in the back office. The system will see you." The weight of his words settled into the air, heavy but undeniable. For Cassie, for Ben, for every silent staff member who thought their work didn't matter, the message was clear. Jackson stepped back from the counter, the silence still holding. Outside, the drizzle had stopped. A pale light cut through the diner windows, softer than the hum of neon, steadier than the clatter of cups. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, the room didn't feel like a stage hiding secrets. It felt like a workplace again. And in that quiet, something shifted. Not just rules, not just access. Trust. Cassie placed her tray down slowly, almost reverently, then looked at Jackson. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The gratitude was in her eyes, and Jackson understood. He hadn't come for breakfast. He hadn't even come for tips. He had come to remind them all why Sunrise existed. And as he turned toward the door, leaving the hum of the diner behind, every person in that room knew things would not go back to the way they were. Not after this morning. The bell above the door chimed again as Jackson stepped outside. The drizzle that had haunted the last few mornings had lifted, leaving the pavement damp, reflecting the diner's neon glow like a broken mirror. He paused just long enough to breathe in the sharp air before pulling his phone from his pocket. "Mara," he said, his voice steady. "Expand it. Every branch. Every register. I want full visibility within 72 hours. On the other end, Mara's voice came crisp. Already underway. Data is streaming in. The anomalies aren't isolated. Brad wasn't the only one. Jackson closed his eyes briefly. He had built Sunrise with a promise that every plate served, every cup poured, every dollar tipped would belong to the people who earned it. Now, the promise was fractured, betrayed not by strangers but by insiders who thought they could rewrite the rules unnoticed. He didn't linger on the sidewalk. He walked straight to his truck, slid into the driver's seat, and opened the dashboard console. Inside was a folder worn from travel, financial statements, old complaint reports, memos marked resolved. He flipped them open, scanning quickly. Patterns that once seemed random now lined up like coordinates. Managers with spotless official records, but whispers of unfair on customer surveys. Employees who left quietly after months of underpayment, their exit interviews filed away without consequence. It wasn't just Cassie, it was systemic. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was Mara forwarding the first compiled chart. 32 branches, 11 flagged. One in every 3 diners running preferred internal roles that rerouted tips into fewer hands. The numbers were damning. Jackson tapped his screen, joining a secure line. Put me through to finance, and bring in HR. We're going deeper than audits. We're going legal. The voices on the call were tense but compliant. Understood, sir. We'll prepare filings. Do you want local law enforcement briefed? Not yet, Jackson answered. We don't hand over a mess until it's mapped. We're going to pull every thread ourselves first. As he drove, the town blurred past familiar sidewalks, small businesses, the same landscape his company had promised to support. He couldn't stop thinking about Cassie's notebook, a waitress who carried the floor every morning and still went home shortchanged. She didn't call a hotline. She didn't file a complaint. She just wrote it down, quietly, like proof that her reality mattered even if no one cared. That notebook had done what entire compliance teams hadn't. It told the truth. Jackson pulled over at a quiet lot on the edge of town. The lot overlooked the highway, trucks moving like veins carrying life across the state. He sat there for a moment, letting the silence press against him. He remembered mopping floors at his first job, scrubbing grease from tiles, earning coins that barely covered a meal. He had promised himself then that if he ever built something bigger, no one who worked for him would feel invisible. And yet here he was, staring at a system that made invisibility the rule. His phone buzzed again, a message from Mara. Audit expanding. Multiple shell. LLCs detected. Same pattern. Same managers. Network scale larger than expected. Jackson tightened his grip on the phone. The fraud wasn't local. It was organized, deliberate. He dialed once more, this time to the board's secure line. When the chair answered, Jackson's words were clear, unshaken. We're not dealing with isolated theft. We're dealing with a culture of silence, and it ends now. He outlined what he had seen Cassie's records, the manipulated POS system, Brad's fabricated vendor accounts, the silent spread across branches. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't need to. The numbers carried the weight. On the other end, the chair spoke carefully. This will go public, Jackson. You know that. Once it does, the brand will take a hit. Jackson looked out at the highway, headlights cutting through the dim light. Then we take the hit. Better to bleed on our terms than to rot quietly from the inside. There was silence, then a slow exhale. All right. You lead. We follow. Jackson ended the call, his resolve sharper than ever. The drizzle had stopped, but the storm was only beginning. Inside Sunrise Diner 28, Cassie was probably back to refilling mugs, carrying trays like nothing had changed. But Jackson knew the truth. Everything had changed. Because the investigation wasn't just about tips or access codes anymore. It was about dignity, about whether the people who carried the weight in silence would finally be heard. And Jackson had no intention of letting them go unheard again. 2 days later, Jackson was back in the city. The headquarters of Sunrise Restaurant Group stood tall against the skyline, glass walls reflecting morning light. Inside the boardroom, screens flickered alive as the internal audit report finished loading. Mara stood at the front, tablet in hand, her voice steady. We've completed the sweep. Out of 32 branches, 12 show the same pattern. Hidden user roles, shadow LLCs, funds diverted into personal accounts. Estimated loss, $1. $4 million in the past year alone. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Numbers that large were more than theft, they were betrayal. Jackson didn't pace. He didn't slam the table. He sat at the head, hands folded, eyes fixed on the data. "This is what happens when silence becomes culture," he said evenly. Managers learned they could bend the system, and no one questioned them. Employees learned complaints went nowhere, so they stopped speaking. And the people who worked the hardest stopped believing they mattered. He thought of Cassie, her frayed apron, her careful notes, her quiet courage to write things down even when she knew no one would read them. Without her, the scheme might have stretched another year, maybe longer. "Every LLC is being dissolved as of this morning," Mara continued. "We've frozen the accounts. Legal has drafted termination files for 7 managers. Local HR has been notified. We're coordinating with finance to restore all withheld tips to staff." The words landed heavy in the room. Restitution, justice, the kind that wasn't flashy but mattered most to the people who lived paycheck to paycheck. Jackson rose now, slow but deliberate. His voice was calm, but every syllable carried. This company was not built on margins, it was built on people, and if people believe they're invisible, the company doesn't survive. Sunrise will not operate in shadows. Not while I'm here. There was no applause, just silence, followed by nods from those who finally understood. When the meeting adjourned, Jackson didn't retreat to his office. He walked outside into the crisp air, phone in hand. He dialed a number he had memorized since that morning at the diner. Cassie answered after a pause, her voice careful. "Hello? It's Jackson," he said simply. "I wanted you to hear it from me first. The audits are done. The money is being returned. What you wrote in that notebook, it started something bigger than you know." There was silence on the line, then the sound of her breath catching. "I didn't think anyone would care," she admitted softly. Jackson's tone softened, not with pity but with conviction. "That's the problem. Too many people think no one cares. You proved them wrong." For the first time in days, Jackson allowed himself a small smile. The storm wasn't over, but the tide had turned, and the voice of one waitress with a notebook had been louder than the silence of an entire corrupted system. Sunrise would rebuild not just with audits and charts, but with dignity, and Jackson knew this was only the beginning. The following week, Jackson returned to Sunrise Diner 28. The air inside felt different, lighter, almost steady. The register screen no longer hid shadow accounts. Every employee logged in with their own ID, their names clearly attached to every shift and every tip. Cassie was on the floor again, moving with the same quiet focus. But this time, her steps didn't feel weighed down. When she brought Jackson his coffee, there was no hesitation, no unspoken truth buried beneath her words. "Tips came through last night," she said, almost in disbelief. "The full amount, split fair. Everyone got what they earned." Jackson nodded, sipping slowly. "That's how it should have always been." And except around the diner, staff moved with a new rhythm, no longer glancing nervously toward the counter, no longer waiting for permission. Even Ben, the young busser, carried himself taller, proud to see his own name appear on the system for the first time. Jackson stood, leaving a bill under the saucer. Not for the amount, not for the gesture, but for the principle. "Fairness isn't a gift," he said softly, meeting Cassie's eyes. "It's the foundation, and it's never optional." The bell above the door chimed as he left, the neon sign glowing steady. For the first time, the diner didn't just feel open, it felt honest. The sun had climbed higher by the time Jackson stepped back onto the street. The air was cool but clear, the drizzle of earlier days replaced with a steady light that made the storefront glass shimmer. He paused for a moment on the sidewalk, looking back at the diner. From outside, it looked like any other small-town spot. Neon letters, chrome edges, the faint hum of morning traffic passing by. But inside, something had shifted forever. Cassie's notebook had done more than expose a scam. It had reminded Jackson why he built Sunrise in the first place. Not for expansion, not for headlines, but for the people who clocked in before dawn, wiped counters, poured coffee, and carried trays without applause. The people who made the place run even when no one said thank you. He walked toward his truck, his voice steady in his own thoughts. "Leadership isn't about being seen," he murmured. "It's about making sure the invisible aren't left behind." His phone buzzed. Another report from Mara. Additional branches corrected. Settlements filed. Repayments processed. Each line in the report was a small victory. Each dollar returned was proof that silence could be broken. Jackson didn't smile, but the weight in his chest eased. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt the company was walking back toward the promise it had started with. Before climbing in, he glanced once more through the diner's window. Cassie was laughing with the trainee, showing her how to balance a tray. Ben was wiping a booth, moving with energy instead of nerves. Customers were eating, drinking, talking, unaware that the place they sat in had been moments away from crumbling under corruption. That was the point. Customers didn't need to see the storm. The staff did. And now, they finally had. Jackson slid behind the wheel, engine humming to life. He didn't linger. He didn't need to. The work wasn't finished, but the foundation had been reset. Sunrise wasn't spotless, but it was honest again, and honesty was stronger than any slogan. As he pulled onto the highway, his voiceover seemed to settle into the silence of the road. I didn't come here for revenge. I came to rebuild what mattered. Fairness, dignity, integrity. They're not luxuries, they're the ground we stand on, and if we don't protect them, we lose more than a company. We lose ourselves. The miles stretched ahead, but for Jackson Reeves, the path was clear. Sunrise had weathered the storm. Now, it would rise again.